Welcome to Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. I'm your host, PP. I've got Sam Jesse here, and we are also being joined by Robert Irby. We had to bring you in, Irby, because we got some big news today. Sam, why don't you kick us off with a cheers?
I will cheers to new Virginia Tech defensive coordinator, Sam Siefkes. I was not on the bingo card for anybody, I don't think, but
I don't think
welcome to Blacksburg.
Cheers.
Welcome, Chief Sief.
I'll go with Chief Sief.
Yeah, we have a new DC. Shares a name with one of the co-hosts here. Siefkes, as Sam nailed for the pronunciation, kicking off the bat. Linebacker coach from the Arizona Cardinals. We'll get into the hire, the process, what it means for Virginia Tech's scheme going forward, and all that good stuff in just a little bit. We also made a strength and conditioning hire in Jared Ferguson, a promotion, an internal hire for a team that needs some change. But could this be a very good thing? We'll talk about that as well. And finally, at the end, we're going to get into the 2025 schedule, which the ACC network belabored, but finally did release in full last night on a, what was it? Was it a 2-hour special or just one? I can't remember, but it took a while. Make sure to like the video and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Let's talk quickly, gentlemen, about Hokie Hoops. This is Too Deep. We do a lot of football coverage, but although I've been helping out with the Hokie Hoop stuff, we need to cover a little bit of it on Too Deep. And the men are 8-12. They had a nice little run after the Duke game, winning 3 out of 4, but have since lost 3 in a row. Most recently, a drubbing at the hands of Clemson. Before that, every game had been pretty competitive. And even this game against Clemson was competitive until, I don't know, the 15-minute mark about of the first half, and then things just fell off. And this is something we're continuing to see, right, Sam, where the team is playing hard, they're playing competitively, and then things just start to go south. Some games it's later in the second half, sometimes it's earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that's on one hand, that's just how basketball works, right? If you play the game long enough, the better team with shooting the higher percentage is gonna pull away there. But I think it's another thing. It just speaks to the depth. You know, they don't have a ton of quality depth on this team. I think if one guy has a bad night, I don't really know where Mike Young turns to. So it's kind of a season where everything kind of has to go perfect for this team to at least have a shot in the last 3-4 minutes of a game. And when it doesn't go all perfect, I think there's just such a talent disparity in some of these games, to be quite honest with you. But they're battling. I think they're a lot more competitive than we thought they would be.
After the first 10 games, it was very dire, because at the beginning of the season, it was like, okay, this team could go 500. And then it was like, will we win an ACC game? And starting with that Pitt game, you started to see signs that they could compete, and they were playing better. And Rob, it's funny, in this game, we had 2 freshmen starting, because Ben Hammond was out, then he came back, but Tyler Johnson and Ben Hammond started in this game. So 2 true freshmen. And Hammond just hasn't been quite the same since the injury.
No, and I think, he's probably not 100%. And I think especially when you have a player that small, he has to rely on that elite quickness and athleticism. And if he can't move the same way, then things can get really, really dire for him quickly, because he'll just get swallowed up. But like Sam said, the fight that this team shows is great. And it's a testament to Mike Young, and it's a testament to just the culture that is in that locker room. It's just a bummer that the talent just doesn't match it. And,
they look really young too. I would point that out. They are significantly younger than the other ACC teams.
Yeah, it's not just the true freshmen. It's a lot of the guys have plenty of eligibility left, and it's contributing to the growing pains. And it's the kind of thing where it's so hard for roster continuity right now in college basketball. And we've seen it firsthand the last couple of years, but we really need, if Mike Young's going to be here, the staff, I think, is a very capable staff. If you can keep guys around and develop and bring in some other portal pieces, there are pieces here that could be useful. Tyler Johnson's been a great freshman. He had the first double-double as a freshman since Justin Bibbs, a couple weeks ago. and he continues to put up numbers. Now, this past game against Clemson wasn't good for just about anybody, but they should get to the double-digit win mark, which looked in jeopardy for a little while. We'll see how it shakes out as we move through the rest of ACC play here. Let's quickly talk about the women, and we'll get to football. 14-6 after the tough loss to NC State on the road. That's a top 25 team, and we always have competitive games with them, but this one didn't go quite well. We're now 5-4 in the ACC because we had beaten Pitt right before that. Pitt's not very good. So we have number 3 Notre Dame coming to Castle on Thursday. That would be a massive upset and a massive win. We already got kind of a signature win for Coach Duffy, but beating Hidalgo and Mines in the Castle, that would be incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be sick. I think they've done a really good job, again, with a really, really young team. They're going to be right on the bubble at the end of the year, and I think that is in and of itself an accomplishment.
Yeah, I think so. They're 5-4, like I said. So if they can go 9-9, Rob, in this conference with as many good teams as there are, you have to figure you get enough quality wins to get in, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And I think they perform well enough in the non-conference, only losing 1 game in the non-conference. I would say, or I guess 2 games in the non-conference, but yeah, I think that their resume should be airtight. The conference is really good. So
yeah, there's 10 teams. Last time I recorded with the boys, it was 10 teams in the top 50 of the net for the women in the ACC. Top 10 of the ACC was in the top 50. Carly's would just have to have a massive game if we're going to beat Notre Dame. And it would be nice if Matilda Eck could be a little bit more consistent. She only had 2 points in 31 minutes against NC State. Karras has been playing really well. Needs to keep that up. 15 points versus the Wolfpack for her. So there's a recipe for an upset against Notre Dame, and I would just absolutely love to see it. But I don't have much more to say on hoops at this point, fellas. Make sure if you guys want to go to rowback.com, use code 2DVT, get 20% off your order. Please do. If you're having any issues with that code, you can also use code Saturday. Give the boys some love. Rowback.com, crave activity. All right, defensive coordinator, fellas. Sam Siefkes. So I'll start with the Jim Knowles thing because that was kind of when he gets to Penn State, that's where the dominoes in the defensive coordinator hire started to fall, I felt like. And it's kind of been cleared up that it's not as if we were waiting for Jim Knowles to be hired by the Hokies, but maybe some guys on that staff and whatnot. So they make the big acquisition, does James Franklin, picking up Knowles. Poindexter kind of never stopped being a candidate, but then looked like he was going to stay on with Penn State. Heavy rumors about Jay Bateman a few nights ago coming over from A&M to be the guy. Almost felt like it was a slam dunk. Several articles online got put out about it, but nope. We wake up to Thamel drop. It looks like Siefkes, and just about everybody, including myself, was surprised, floored even by the news. Rob, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the name come across your feed?
Yeah, I got to say, I think this might be the first time in years that I've actually had news broken to me via the ESPN app. Like they always drop the alert like an hour and a half after everything goes down. But they were on at that time. I think the last time was actually when Frank Beamer was announced his retirement. But anyway,
you got Thamel working for you. That'll happen.
Yeah. We got Thameled. And I think I audibly said out loud, "Who?"
You did the meme.
I literally did the Snoop Dogg meme. And I don't know. I mean, it's the reaction is what it is. I mean, whether it's a good commodity or a bad commodity, it's not a known commodity. And in college football, that's we want to know what we're getting ourselves into, especially when you make us wait 46 days for that answer. I don't know. I mean, we can get more into it, but first reaction was I was like a little skeptical, but I think digging a little beyond the surface here, I think that this guy's really bright, and it'll just be a question of whether he can make it all translate to actually winning. So
I'm not going to ask the same question to you, Sam, because it's going to be largely repetitive, but I'll put it to you this way. I don't think the fan base was particularly enamored with the decision. Like when it comes out, What was your take about the reaction to the hire? Because I'm not just talking about Twitter. I got personally a bunch of text messages about it from some of my more casually following friends. Like, what the hell is this? Like, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah. Look, I'll say one thing. I think there are very few people that Brent Pry could have realistically hired in this cycle that wouldn't have gotten that reaction. And so I'll just put that out there. Like, I think
Poindexter would have been one of them.
Poindexter would have been one of them. But again, like, how many times has Poindexter been passed over for a DC job?
3 times.
Yeah, I think there would have been a faction of people that were critical of that, like it wouldn't have been this slam dunk.
Yeah. And if he is waiting for the UVA job, like, congratulations. Whatever.
I got you. No,
I think it was always going to be a loss. I also think he is one of those coaches where, as a fan, even as like big football fans, you're not going to know his name. Like, unless you're from Wisconsin and you're with that program, or you like graduated from a SoCon school when he was at Wofford, or you are an Arizona Cardinals or Minnesota Vikings fan, you're not going to know this guy. Like, they don't talk about linebackers coaches on TV. They don't talk about him on podcasts. So it's because it's such an unknown. I think that drives a lot of the reaction. I also think fans wanted to see Virginia Tech pay 1.4, 1.5 mil for the defensive coordinator. And I think they looked around at the market, and they, as in Virginia Tech, looked around at Notre Dame might have to hire a new guy. Miami has to hire a new guy. Penn State, Clemson,
Florida,
Ohio State.
When you wait 60 days, these things happen.
Yeah.
What is it? I'm sorry, I'm exaggerating. What was it? 45 days?
45. I mean, it's just like
6 weeks.
There's a point where you don't, as much as Virginia Tech can't afford to miss this hire, they also fiscally cannot afford to pay that much money.
Right.
Like, it would bankrupt the program to have to pay a DC. Like, what are they paying Knowles at Penn State? Like
$3 million.
3.2. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I mean, that's just on a different level completely. Like, that seems insane to me. But
yeah. So I we'll see. It really, what matters is how they play against South Carolina.
Yeah.
I think in the release, it's not so much the name of the coordinator, because a lot of people aren't going to know the household names of even SEC defensive coordinators. But if they see Tim Banks from Tennessee, then it's like, oh shit, like, we got the guy from Tennessee. Oh, we got the guy from A&M. And it would have like instantly gone over, like, this is good. We're making a move. But that's not what happened. That doesn't mean that this guy is not going to be good. As much as we need this to be a home run, it could be. We're going to tear into whether that we believe that could be the case or not in just a second here. Let's talk about what Pry had to say about the process, because he was very excited about getting Sam when it happened today. Now we got, I'm going to keep saying Sam like double the amount that I normally do now that this guy's our defensive coordinator, but he's very excited about him. He kept hearing good things, kept coming back to him, was kind of how he phrased it. Tons of calls about Sam from NFL head coaches, CFB people. And he did kind of outline how they did it. Like, they had 20 candidates. Then they kind of narrowed it down to 10 serious candidates, had 4-hour interviews for most of those guys. And some of the ones that weren't 4-hour interviews were many ongoing phone conversations. But he said Siefkes knocked it out of the park in the interview and was aggressive about becoming the Virginia Tech DC. As much as people want to say, like, oh, Pry's a lame duck, no one wants to coach here, it's a power for defensive coordinator job. There is some desirability there, and Sam seemed to have that desire to get here. Pry mentioned his talent, his football IQ, his confidence, his ability to adjust, something we talked about a lot this year, and how good the Cardinals were at situational football. Was there anything like else in that like initial part of the presser when he was talking about that process that caught your eye, or why we ended up with Sam, that you had any commentary on, Rob?
Yeah, I think to me, it almost seems like I was sitting here trying to think of a good analogy. I'm going to roll with one, and this might suck, but it's like if you were, hiring for like a major engineering position, and like you had all these, very qualified candidates, but the first person you interviewed was like young Sheldon. And then like, and you're like, all right, this guy has no resume, but he's a freaking genius. So it's like he's setting the bar. Can these qualified people pass the bar? And I guess over time, it just doesn't work out that way, whether it's, other things happening or, hey, this qualified person isn't as impressive as we thought they were. Basically, I feel like Siefkes probably like set the standard for other candidates to reach, maybe a little more surprisingly, because I would imagine he was somewhat out of left field for Pride in a sense too, to the point where it's just like the guy made it to where Pride couldn't say no. You know what I mean? And you miss out on a couple top guys here or there. Your your Tim Bankses of the world, if you were even trying to get someone that big. And then, yeah, if it's a question of this kind of wonderkin who's hasn't done it on this level, but has all these good recommendations and is very impressive versus like a Jay Bateman where it's, okay, he's a known commodity, but is it a good known commodity?
Right. And I should clarify, Siefkes is 33. That's what you're kind of referring to with the young Sheldon and the wonderkind. And he's young. He is younger than Chris Marv is today.
He was 26 when he got his first defense coordinator job.
Right. And so clearly there's some kind of acumen, some kind of talent there. And he's moved up. Like was coaching in the NFL. Now he wasn't a DC in the NFL, but he had been at 2 different stops and had glowing reviews at both of those stops. And you mentioned the thing about missing out on someone. Sam, do you think that how far down the list do you think that Siefkes was in terms of like top choices? Or do you think like Robert said, did he kind of set the bar?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to speculate on what number. I think Pry said, they had a list of 20 people, the 10 they interviewed. What number of that top 10 was he? I don't know. I don't think you'll ever know. No one will. It will go down in Hokie lore, either for a good reason or a bad reason. I do think
we certainly heard a lot of names over the last month.
We did. And I also think, how many of those names were truly, truly interested in the job? Like there are some guys who interviewed for the job, we'll never know. But I think the amount of time they spent with them, I think they did 4-hour interviews as well as multiple video calls and multiple phone calls. I think they did their due diligence with these guys. And I also think maybe he was a guy that right after the NFL season, they were able to interview him. And maybe he did set the bar because, as Brent Pry later said in the press conference, that one of the reasons this took so long is because one of their top candidates was in the championship game. Now that could be Guerreri, the defensive backs coach from Ohio State. It could have been Knowles, the defense coordinator from Ohio State. Could have been either of those guys, or
Walton, right?
Or Walton. Yeah. But so they obviously interviewed Walton or Guerreri, and then they chose, Siefkes. Mm-hmm. So I've never doubted that Brent Pry knows defensive football. I don't think anybody's doubting that. So if this is a guy that he rolls with, like, who am I to say, he should have gone with Bateman. He should have gone with Guerreri. He should have gone with Poindexter, Yeah.
A couple other things from the process were that he was told by a couple different head coaches in the NFL that Siefkes would be an NFL DC one day, that they felt very strongly about that. Something to be said for that. He also mentioned the linebacker that used to play for Penn State and had kind of given the name of Siefkes to Pry, and I'm blanking on the linebacker right now. I actually tweeted about him earlier. And then Ryan Smith is also on the Arizona staff, who used to coach for the Hokies and at Penn State.
It's Jesse Lakita.
Jesse Lakita, exactly. Yeah. So we got a Sam and we got a Jesse here. He had great things to say, and Pry had a lot of conversations with Lakita about it. So Jesse Lakita, I pray that you were right about this one, because Pry put a lot of faith in you, man.
Build the statue.
Was Jesse Lakita
to Beamer on the bench?
Was he one of the recruits that chose Penn State over Tech? Because he could really go down in Virginia Tech lore.
I'm not sure I think he's Canadian. I think Lakita might be Canadian. I'm not sure. But he graduated, I think he was done at Penn State in 21.
Okay.
I was on his wiki page early. I was on a lot of different wiki pages earlier today, but that was one of not the DC's because I don't think he had a wiki page up until maybe a little bit later today, or a Twitter page. But he's got both. You can follow at Coach Siefkes right now. I believe that's been confirmed that is a real Twitter account. So, but yeah, that's kind of all the stuff I had about the process. Pry had he said he was excited. He genuinely seemed excited about getting Siefkes to come into Tech. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, relieved too. I think it was a weight off
Probably.
his shoulders. And I think he's, I think for him, there was a certain amount of pressure with having your understudy work as your DC. I think he took a lot of the defensive performance personally, very clearly. I mean, you saw that since day one. And so I think this whole process has probably been really tough for him personally, but also professionally, because, admitting a major fault like that at a big program is very, very difficult. And I think it's not a secret. Pete, we've talked about it since day one of last year. Like, he needs to win, and he needs to win now. It's not a secret with Brent Pry and Whit Babcock and Tim Sands and anybody else. Like, he has to win. This hire has to work out. So I think you definitely saw him some relief to, as he said, he was in Virginia Beach this morning. I think he flew back out here this evening, or flew somewhere else. So he's out recruiting. Excited to get Siefkes out recruiting as well. It sounds like he has already hit the ground running in that regard.
It sounded like it was a ton of work to vet all these candidates, to interview, because maybe to a fault, Brent Pry was doing his due diligence on this hire. He had a lot of time to do it, but he was doing a lot of work. It sounded like a ton of time on the phone and Zoom and in person and all that kind of stuff. So yes, I do feel on that relief. When you look at his career, now let's get into a little bit about Siefkes and what he's done. We talked about the Cardinals. He was with the Vikings before them. What kind of stands out to you, Rob, about what he's done in his past? Like, what are you honing in on?
I would say it's two things. I mean, excuse me. I think it's the Wofford experience of being a defensive coordinator and having, that experience putting together really productive defenses. But I think honestly, more than that is, and this is something that I value a lot, is the pedigree of coaches that he has coached with. Our Jonathan Gannon debates aside, I know Eagles fans don't love Jonathan Gannon, but aside from him, you think about it, this is a guy that coached with Mike Zimmer, who's one of the most brilliant defensive minds in football. And then after Zimmer gets fired, Kevin O'Connell is so impressed with Siefkes that he decides to keep Siefkes. So Siefkes coached 1 year with Zimmer, then one with O'Connell, which that does not happen a lot.
No, you're right.
And then, coaching under Dave Aranda as a GA at Wisconsin, there's some really, really good football minds in there. And hopefully, it's interesting that all kind of happened in between his Wofford stint and now. So I'd be curious to see how much he's soaked up from that after having those productive defenses. But all that's to say, I think this is a guy that has his own scheme that he's confident in, and his own philosophies that he's confident in. But at the same time, he's spent the last 4 years learning under some really, really, really great coaches too. So,
yeah, no, Sam, what are your comments on what you're looking at in his career?
The biggest thing in his journey is he's never dropped down a level, right? So he was a GA at Wisconsin. GA doesn't really count for dropping down a level. That's kind of your platform to enter that job market, but he's never dropped down a level. He was at UW Platteville, and then goes up to Wofford, and then goes up to the NFL. Not a lot of coaches have that career trajectory. I mean, look at, not to name names, but look at Ron Crook, right? One of the red flags with him was he was at Cincinnati and then had to drop down to the FCS level and then came back to Virginia Tech. It's well, why did you have that drop to the FCS level? Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, South Dakota's offensive line has been pretty darn good without him too. So that can be kind of a red flag for some coaches. He's never had that. And also, he's never been at a place that's had a bad defense. I mean, at Wofford, 2 years in a row, they're the best defense in the conference. At UW Platteville, 2 years, very, very good defense. Minnesota had very good defenses while he was there. Arizona this year, people are going to say like, oh, 20, they finished the regular season like 20th, 21st in like total yards per game or something. They were supposed to be like 30th. Like they overperformed defensively this year. And so I think his track record of success consistently at every single year, and also the trajectory of him moving up, those are really promising for me. And I don't think you would have seen that in other candidates. Look at a guy like Bateman coming from, he's had terrible defenses.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, his defenses at UNC sucked. Like they were bad.
He recruited like hell, but he was like 105 in yards per play his last year there.
Yeah. And like, what makes you think it'll be different this time? Because guess what? Brent Pry cannot afford the number 105 defense in the country. So I think there are promising things about his career. That being said, this is not somebody who has decades of experience calling defenses. And I think that was one of the boxes that Pete, you and I talked, we needed that box checked. And I don't know if I'm like, I'm dotting my pen in that box, but I'm not really checking that off.
Yeah. I said that I wanted D1 experience, and I specifically said D1 because good FCS experience was going to be good for me in terms of calling plays. I wanted a guy who had called plays at the D1 level and had success. He did technically do that. He has done that. And the numbers specifically, he was first in the Southern Conference in total defense in 2018, first in 2019, was top 10 nationally in scoring defense in that first year. And Brent Pry commented on this as well as he was talking about some of his accolades, that those 2 years were under kind of different defensive structures based on the personnel he had on hand. Some of the kind of stuff that we love to hear, a guy who can adapt and make changes because of the strengths of the guys he has in the locker room. And your point on ascending is a good one. It's not maybe as fast as Sean McVay, but it's pretty fast. I mean, he's a young man, and now he's going to be sitting in this chair. And like, I'll get back to this on my overall thoughts when we kind of close out this segment, but this experience is more than the last two guys. Like it's that we had chosen, and it's significantly more. Yeah. And so I really like the time at Wofford. That's kind of what I'm looking at, what I've like, because I do love what you had to say, Robert, like getting all that nice comments, and Hokie Sports has been putting them out. VT football accounts have been putting them out. Put the quote from Dave Aranda, whoever it is, on Twitter. That's good, but I can't, like, that's not tangible to me. Like, Bud Foster was fawning all over Justin Hamilton, and it didn't end up meaning anything. And we'll get to the Bud Foster piece of this a little bit later too, and how that might work. But I do like what I see from his history. It's not super extensive. I don't really want to go back to UW Platteville or him as a GA, because I don't really think that matters, that Wisconsin had the number one defense when he was a GA. I guess he saw it and saw it at the highest level. He was there.
Osmosis.
He was the straw that stirred the drink. Yeah.
Brent Pry was also there in 1995, and we have not been 1995 level in a couple of years.
Yeah, all he was doing was partying on Bourbon Street, right?
That's right. So let's get to some of these other presser notes I had from Pry, and this is going to link into the scheme change stuff. He wants to do the multiple looks. He wants to be confusing for offenses. And when he was asked about the recruiting, like, did you recruit based on this new scheme? He more or less said yes, that they have been wanting to dabble with playing specifically he mentioned 3 safeties. And what we saw in the portal, that kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I have some a quick stat for people that I found really interesting for this. So when you're playing, and disclaimer, I am not a defensive football savant at all. So Mike Holmes, fact check me on this. But when you play that 3 safety look, the mentality of the defense is very, bend, don't break, rally to the football, make tackles. And when you saw Virginia Tech's defense last year, they did a lot of things well, but one thing they didn't do is there were a lot of open passes at that intermediate 10 to 15 plus area. The average depth of target for Virginia Tech last year against Virginia Tech was 9.15 yards downfield. That's the 13th highest in Power 4. That's basically saying when they're targeting passes, the guy the quarterback thinks is open is pretty far downfield. So this is a defense that is going to try to alleviate that and make you earn every single yard. And it's also a defense that in the red zone is very, very tough to defend. Arizona has the 7th best red zone defense in the NFL this season, only allowing a touchdown about 54%. That's better than Kansas City. It's better than Pittsburgh. It's better than a lot of the best defenses in the NFL. So this was a defense where, and Brent Price said it, situational football. One, you're going to feel much more comfortable in scenarios like we saw against Miami and against Vanderbilt and against Syracuse, where you just need a stop. You just can't let up a touchdown. Don't let anybody behind you. Don't let up big chunk plays. And you're also going to feel pretty good in the red zone. Virginia Tech, especially in like overtime periods and things like that, was not a very good red zone defense last year.
Yeah. So the reason that he's getting asked these questions is because exactly what you said. Siefkes and his experience is largely with odd man fronts and just a different style of defense in general than what Bud and Pry have traditionally run. And it does make you think, like when we were getting all those portal acquisitions, are they telling them that they're going to be running a 3-4 sometimes? Are they telling them they're going to be doing the 3 high safety look? Because it kind of seems like you would have had to get all these safeties to come in. But at the same time, Pry's like, we had so many official visits. You're just trying to get talent in the door. But what I'm seeing, Rob, is the talent that we have on hand based on the portal and based on what we already have would suit what Siefkes has been good at and what he has been experienced with.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, I think it's telling that, they only brought in one true corner in Brown Murray. And then I guess Bass was really the only true linebacker they brought in. So they're clearly putting an emphasis on, those safeties, that back end, and then kind of those, modifying the defensive line a little bit with the edge rushers like Jonkum, Jonkum is the player that I'm most excited to see what they do with, because you're talking about a oversized middle linebacker that you're going to move to edge. That guy could perceivably play like 5 different spots on the field. So I'm excited about that. And I think that too, if you look at that kind of odd man front, and if you're going to have like those edge rushers, with your 3-4, and, I'm a Steelers fan. And so this is the classic Dick LeBeau style front of a defense. And it's just it's always what the Steelers have run is, when you have your like true, that 3-4, but you have your 2 edge rushers as well, where it's essentially a 5-man front. You basically have 3 defensive tackles, with one of them being the like massive like nose tackle, like like your Vince Wilfork type of player, or a Casey Hampton as the Steelers had back in the day. So like Kelvin Gilliam, like get Jazari Priester, like throw a 300-pounder in the middle there, let him clog up space. Then you have like your kind of 2, like a Cam Hayward type, like a defensive tackle in a traditional sense, but is kind of more of a good pass rusher. So like the Nash kid they brought in, and Copeland, players like that who are big but also pretty agile. And then you have your edge rushers on the outside. I think that there's a lot of possibilities for what they can do here, and I'm really excited about it. I think that they're going to really find a way to exploit whatever weaknesses these offenses have. And, it's all about putting it into practice. The theory's great, but, I just love the ownership of the scheme that he has in general. So,
well, Robert, I'll tell you this, I hate the Pittsburgh Steelers with a burning passion, but
sure
if Kelvin Gilliam turns out to be Cam Hayward and Ben Bell turns out to be TJ Watt, I'd be pretty stoked on that.
Yeah.
That'd be sick.
The idea of Jonkum playing that kind of hybrid outside linebacker role is very intriguing, but he's also big enough to probably play end in that system too. I don't know. Like it's going to be really interesting the primary benefit of a 3-4, and I'm not saying we're going to run a 3-4 because we'll talk about the Siefkes podcast that he did a number of years ago when he was at Wofford. It was a great interview, and I recommend anyone who's interested in X's and O's or just the philosophy of our new DC to listen to it. But he talked a lot about 3-down principles and 4-down principles, different down linemen, and basically just being as flexible as possible, being as versatile as possible with those fronts. But with a 3-4 defense, a 3-down look, it allows you to put diversified pressure on the quarterback. Essentially, you can do so many different things, as Robert said, and then also supplement coverage with your plus athletes. And so it's not so different conceptually from what Bud Foster wants to do. It's just the scheme and where all the guys are on the field is different.
Yeah, and I also think something important to recognize with this defensive scheme. We do see it in college football. It is pretty rare though. And usually it manifests as a hybrid between a 3-4 and like a 3-3-5 when you have to go into more, your traditional pass defensive sets. A team that runs it a lot is Iowa State, and they've been very successful with it for a while under Matt Campbell. And this season, Iowa State, pretty darn good defense running that 3-3-5. So they'll have the 3 deep safeties, or they'll bring one down as more of a nickel back. So this year on deep balls against Iowa State, 11 passes of 40 plus yards, only 2 of them completed. 33 passes of 30 plus yards, only 6 of them completed. That's about a 20%. So you're looking at like a pretty good scheme for limiting explosive plays, which are one of the most highly correlated non-points stats to winning in college football. You're also looking at one where you can recruit defensive backs a whole lot easier than you can, edge rushers, linebackers. I mean, how difficult has it been for Virginia Tech to find 3 p.m. linebackers over the past few years?
It plays exactly into our best position history, which is DB. Yeah. And so we have you walk through the halls of Merriman and it's all DB NFL jerseys. And that is a good sell for if you're going to put more of those guys on the field. It's probably easier for us to get. And someone else mentioned the fact that, I think it was Ed saying, in the NIL world for Virginia Tech, another reason it might be better to run this type of scheme, because the athletes we can get for the money that we have, it might be better for us, essentially.
Yeah, I think it's we talked about Tech needing to play money ball. That's a way to do it.
So yeah, both French and Coach Holmes have hinted at the odd man front, not necessarily even a 3-man front, but 3 down linemen and the 2 linebackers if they're going to edge rush or drop into coverage on the outside. So it's that part of it for the real football nerds, which again, Sam said he's not a savant. Neither am I. I don't know about you, Rob, but for the people who really love this stuff, the coaches who follow this team and former players, I think that will be really interesting to see how they utilize everything in this scheme. And if we wanted, I don't have a ton of questions, but did you guys listen to that podcast that he did?
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to? Okay. Because some of his philosophies in the podcast were interesting. He talked a lot about one-on-one matchups, specifically get our best player on their worst player, which I've always thought of more if you're an offensive coordinator rather than a defensive coordinator. But it's interesting that he's trying to essentially funnel their worst player to a position where he has to make a play. And I thought that was an interesting aspect. Was there anything else in there that you kind of caught from the interview that you were like, man, I really like what this guy has to say, or something you found, or you didn't like what he had to say?
Yeah. I like what I'm going to, build on the point you just made. It's actually funny. A lot of people have been throwing around the memes of Wofford to VT, Mike Young 2.0 with this guy. But what you're describing is also a lot of what Mike Young's offense does. Truly, Mike Young's offense is trying to find a mismatch, and it's trying to, you start in the post and you try to get your post man to be able to score one-on-one. So then that draws attention, and then he can pass it around and eventually somebody's open. Like you're finding that mismatch. And it's interesting, like you said, for the defense to be doing that on the reverse end. Yeah, I think that ultimately does just lead to the versatility, though. And I think in college, especially, that's astronomically important, because how many different offensive systems are there out there? How many different just crazy crockpot offenses are out there versus, a team like Pitt that just wants to run it down your throat? Like you got to be prepared to stop every kind of offense there is. Like you got to go stop this, elaborate Garrett Riley offense at Clemson one week, and then, keep Stanford or Pitt from just running it up the gut on you the next week.
And he talked a lot about that, whether they're in a tight formation or a spread out formation, and how he defends that, and the different looks he tries to give in different cases. It was really quite fascinating. And I said how much he emphasized switching between 3 and 4 down principles based on the offensive personnel, like based on just what's out there. All right, we're going to switch it up. Let's run this. He also emphasized, and I love this, the simplicity for players to learn, because you can make a scheme that's fantastic. And I worried that bringing in a guy from the NFL, potentially you'd have an overcomplicated schematic, but he has worked at the college level. He knows what college kids can handle. And he had emphasized the fact that we're going to make things easy to learn for these guys, make sure that the tackling technique and effort is on point. I loved when I heard that. And stopping the run is a priority. I know a lot of coaches say it, but he was harping on that. And in some ways, I think, Sam, people think that like the 3-4 defense in general is better for stopping the run. I don't know if it's so nuanced.
I think every defensive scheme, like no one's going to be like, yeah, this is a decent defensive scheme, except it can't stop the run. Like, I think it
always depends on the guys you got in the field and how you coach it and everything.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're running Tim Waltz's 4-4, then I think like you're pretty two-dimensional on defense. Like you do see matchup issues, and I think what'll be really interesting is the beginning of this season. If you look at the teams Virginia Tech has to play, they are like weird offensive schemes. Like you'll have South Carolina, who basically just says, we have a battering ram at quarterback, try and stop him. That's their only offense. They're not good at anything else except for Lenore Sellers running. Then you play Old Dominion, who runs the wide. They'll run two guys each side all the way out to the sidelines. They'll spread you out and they'll read option you to death. Like that's their bread and butter. That's totally different. And then you have Vanderbilt running a shotgun triple option with Diego Pavia back there. Like those are 3 really unique, difficult offenses to get ready for. And Virginia Tech's going to have to do that in the first 3 weeks of the season with a new defensive coordinator and a lot of new defensive players. That sounds scary, but also none of those teams know what Virginia Tech's defense is going to look like.
Mm-hmm. That it works both ways for sure.
It does work both ways, but I think that as we transition into schedule talk here in a little bit, that's really, really interesting to me.
Did you hear the part where Pry said they have a project going already on South Carolina? Like they're already analyzing film and stuff like that?
Yeah, tackle Lenore Sellers. That's your film.
I just thought that was nice. Hey, we're game planning already. That's good. A little bit. That was another thing.
The game planning. Come in as an analyst for the first game of the year. Just contract him out for that first game. He was sick first game of the year.
He was. You're right. He had a lot of success. Well, apparently Siefkes was heavily involved in the game planning for the Cardinals, maybe even at the Vikings as well. Something that Pride talked about. And the last thing from that podcast is the positionless defense. There's another, Robert, like a basketballism, like positionless basketball. Siefkes mentioned many times positionless defense, guys that can do a bunch of different things in different roles in different structures. And Pride kind of echoed that in the presser. And I really liked that. So I guess if we're going to try and close this out, I'll ask the simple question. Are we happy with the hire? I say the collective we, for the 3 of us or individually, like, is it improvement over Marv?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. That's a good place to start.
That
But what your overall thoughts on the hire, Sam?
it is certainly an improvement. I think you look at resume and it blows Marv and it blows Russell Hamilton out of the water. No disrespect to those guys, but it does. I think Tech either needed to hire a home run, Tim Banks, Jim Knowles, proven guy, or they needed to get a little weird with it. I think they got a little weird with it, and it might work out. I don't know if Virginia Tech is ever going to have the talent on its team to mano-a-mano beat, Miami, Florida State at its best, Clemson at its best. We haven't seen that in a very long time. I think they need to get a little weird schematically. They need an ace up their sleeve, and you bring in a young, hotshot NFL guy. Recruits love hearing about NFL ties. I mean,
that's a big piece of this, though, too.
He has a lot of there's a lot of things about Sam Siefkes that differentiate himself from other defensive coordinators and are promising. On the flip side, it's a little scary.
Right. There's a certain amount of gambling that goes on. What are your thoughts on the overall, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tremendous gamble with tremendous upside. That's how I would describe it. I think that, I hate to like draw this comparison and you're gonna roll your eyes, but like his philosophy is not that different than Bud Foster's in terms of like that is how Bud Foster turned Virginia Tech's defense into what it was like, yes, he found the diamonds in the rough, like brought in all these turned 2 stars into 4 stars and all that. But it was also schematically, he was far ahead of every single offense he was facing for a decade plus.
Mm-hmm.
And it was challenging for offenses to know exactly what Tech was going to do. He was mixing up the fronts. It was impossible to read. And it seems like that's really what Siefkes is going for here. And I think that is just such a far cry from what we're used to with Marv, where Marv, like I think Sam mentioned this earlier, he kind of was just this extension of Pry in a sense. And he was basically the guy that was doing the things that Pry knew he couldn't do those things anymore. So he was just delegating it to Marv.
And it wasn't being innovative in any way.
No, it wasn't. It was he was calling plays from Brent Pry's playbook, it seemed like. And whereas this guy has the autonomy to, run the defense how he sees fit, while also having 2 great defensive minds in Pry and Foster to kind of help him mold it. But if you kind of let him run with it, as long as he can teach the scheme, and like you mentioned, making it easy to learn, that was kind of an issue that Hamilton faced. Was he completely flipped to this zone heavy system, and because of COVID and whatever else, like it just didn't connect with the players. And so if you can avoid that issue, and then he doesn't fumble under the high pressure situations, I think the potential's really high here. So
autonomy is a very interesting word that you use, because he's coming in with a lot of different concepts that Brent Pry has said he's very excited about, these new concepts. But it's not Brent Pry's bread and butter, so to speak. So you have to kind of give this kid some autonomy. And you're essentially giving him the keys to this offense that, like, you're learning on the fly a little bit. I mean, I know he has a lot of experience in the defensive game, and he said when he spoke to him, like, what he said, he was able to absorb it pretty easily. That's pretty much what Brent Pry said word for word. Like, I understood what he was trying to say in a period of 4 hours of how he might change the defense. And with Bud there, like, he's not going to have full autonomy. Pry and Bud and all these other assistant coaches are there, but it's going to be his defense. Like, it really is going to be his defense, and he is young. And so that's where the gambling comes in. And age can be just a number. But we have found, I think Hamilton was 37, Marv was 32, and those are definitely on the younger side for defensive coordinators, and they didn't work out. And it might not have been because of their age. It could have been because of their experience. There are a lot of different things, but age and experience tend to go hand in hand. Well, at the very least, this guy has the experience that I had said I was looking for in a defensive coordinator. Some play calling experience, and he was successful with that play calling experience on a D1 level. I agree with the gamble. I agree with the upside that you just said. The other part of the gamble is the recruiting. And it may end up not being a gamble in that regard because Price said he might not be one of the coaches that goes on the road. And so if he's not one of the coaches that goes on the road, of course a DC is going to do a little recruiting here and there, phone calls and that kind of thing. But it may not be as big a factor that he doesn't have this long lineage of recruiting like Jay Bateman has. I think that's about sums it up for my overall thoughts.
Yeah, just let him sleep in the film room, like just put this guy in a bunker 6 days a week, bring him out on Saturday.
It also doesn't sound like he's going to coach a position, right?
Yeah, he said he was going to roam around.
I did want to talk about this of like what we think that just like what that will look like who's going to coach linebackers, that sort of thing. Like I do
love the fact that he has coached linebackers at the highest level. Like that to me, when I saw that middle linebacker specifically, like he is coached at the highest level. Love that because we've talked about it a million times. So that was cool. And I expect he will have a lot of attention there, but we do have a DB and we do have Pry. We have all these guys that are Gouvier Winslow that are familiar with linebacker play. So that it will be funny to see what kind of where he focuses in. Sorry, Rob, we lost you for a second.
Sorry about that. I was just going to say Sean Quinn could coach linebackers,
Xavier DB's still there.
Yeah. Coach him in the bowl game. So he seems to have a much more astute football mind from everything I've read and everything I've listened to than the last two guys we've tried. And I'm not trying to besmirch those two gentlemen. They seem like good guys, but we're all hoping for a better future here. That's what we're hoping for. Let's just talk quickly about Jared Ferguson. Price said he was one of 4 candidates, a Mike Gentry disciple, and people close to the program really seem to love this move, which in some ways I find scary because sometimes when you're close to it, you can't be objective. But I'm going to trust. I like a lot of these people that are saying the right things, and I trust their judgment. So again, I'm hopeful. And I want them to be right, and I want him to get us back to being strong, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, get them boys in the gym. Let's go.
Do you guys have a problem with it being internal in any way?
I don't know anything about strength and conditioning, clearly. So I got nothing.
Okay. I just for the devil's advocate, like the argument would be he was in the room when the mentality potentially wasn't good. But I think we talked about this with Dan, Sam. Like not everyone who works under someone would do what their boss does.
Yeah, and also, he has a couple years of experience seeing what doesn't work, what does work, what doesn't work. Like he knows these players and what they're good at, what they're not good at. So, coming in as a guy who's been in the program, he does have a bit of a head start on what another candidate would have.
And he satisfies Brett's requirement in that he looks like a strength coach.
He's a big dude. He's a big dude. Yeah.
Brett just wants a really muscly strength coach because that makes sense in his brain. And I kind of agree. I tend to agree.
That dude with the handlebar mustache.
Right. Yeah. Remember that guy?
Coach.
Is he still at Oregon? Where's he at?
I think he's
at Miami.
Cristobal to Miami.
Oh, that's right.
Are you allowed to put a candidate through a physical workout in an interview? Or would you get in trouble with someone for that?
I don't see why you couldn't.
Okay.
You just pop on some P90X, see how they do.
Yeah.
That's what they do with professional athletes. So
I would bet you if you're trying out for Peloton to be one of their like highly sought after coaches, that they put you through some shit.
Yeah. I'm thinking out loud here.
All right. So, and he finally said something about Matt Moore too, but we've discussed Matt Moore at length, so we don't need to go into it. The 3 hires come together. I think Matt Moore is an absolute home run. I think Ferguson is solid. And like I said, I'm going to trust the judgment of some people that know that world better than I do. And then this unknown of Siefkes and just trying to get to know it over the last couple days. Like, I'm a lot more hopeful than when I got the news. I will say that. And I don't want to be accused of drinking VT Kool-Aid. I encourage everyone to do your due diligence and look into it and see what you think. Listen to that podcast. I think it was called the Coaching and something podcast. I'll
Coaches
tweet
and
it out.
Coordinators podcast.
Coaches and Coordinators podcast. Very generic name.
Yeah.
It was from his second or third year at Wofford. Really interesting stuff there. But we can move on from DC if you guys think you're all closed out there.
Sure.
All right. Sam, are you drinking anything tonight?
Yeah, I'm drinking the Hefeweizen again, the German Hefeweizen.
That's the German Shepherd?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Finishing that one.
What's your rating on that? Because I don't think I ever logged it.
4.25. It's delicious. I love this stuff, man.
Okay.
It's one of my favorites that I've had locally here in the 757 area.
And Robert, are you having anything?
Yeah, I am drinking the Rad Little Thing IPA from Sierra Nevada.
I haven't had that one.
Yeah, it's one of their, they've kind of beat the dead horse of the hazy little thing. No one does a hazy like Sierra Nevada. The thing about it is it's branded as East Coast haze, West Coast flavor. So it's essentially a hazy IPA, but with that West Coast kind of dry hop flavor to it. So it's a little more on the bitter end. Honestly, I'm a huge West Coast IPA guy. I don't really care for hazies as much. I like the hops more. And so this is kind of a good middle ground. I think that it's probably the best for what it is.
What's the percentage on it?
It is 7.
7 even. I like
Yep.
that.
So I would put it I'd give it a 3.8. Like, I think it's solid for what it is. And, it's a pretty good drink. So
I prefer those. Like, I haven't had that one, but a West Coast, a little bit more bite.
Yeah.
I need some food with it. I prefer it with food. I can obviously drink without it, but I also think when you have the West Coast, the first one is okay, and then they get better and better as you have more and more, like in a session, so to speak. I had some Fidens over the weekend, which is an Albany, New York brewery, and it's very, very well recognized for being good. I'm just having a light beer tonight, but yeah, I had some Guinness over the weekend watching the Eagles game. What was it? Oh, Yinlings. I was kind of sticking with just like the mainstays. I'm very superstitious sometimes when it comes to watching the Eagles specifically. Like, I'm not as superstitious with the Hokies, and I don't really know why. Of course, there are some things that bleed over, but like, I want to be like in the same place, drinking the same thing, wearing the same thing, and I will be doing that hopefully for the Super Bowl, all in the same place that I just was. But yeah, Fidens, if you can find it, Fidens, very good beer. They have a variety of good things. I had some Other Half as well. Other Half has been coming down to Philly. Like, they started in Brooklyn. They have one in DC. They have one in Philly. I pretty much like everything Other Half does too. So that's the end of our little beer corner there. Schedule notes, gentlemen. Let me put this on the screen, and then we'll get out of here. 2025 schedule came out. When you look at this, there's a couple things that jump out to me. I'll let you guys get first crack at it. What jumps out to you from the schedule, Sam?
Well, other than those 3 really unique offenses to start the season, I think it's really nice not to play Old Dominion in Norfolk and you get more home games. That's pretty sick.
Mm-hmm.
I think that opener at NC State, I think it's a good time to get NC State. That's a team in a lot of flux. They're replacing a lot of guys. I think that's a good time to get NC State, especially with the FCS team the week before. Feel good.
Wofford. How ironic.
Yeah. Pretty
awesome.
ironic there. And I also think that last November's tough. November's really tough. But I also think it's really nice that Tech gets Miami at home in late November. I think that is a massive, massive win for the Hokies.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Rob,
No.
I'm
going to pause. Massive win in terms of a scheduling win.
Oh,
I'm
you're not saying that we're going to
win.
win. Okay. How could I have misinterpreted that? Rob, what you got over there?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me is feeling like an SEC team with only 4 true road games. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And someone else pointed out it's really only 3.
Because one of them's UVA.
Yeah, one of them
them's
is Lane
UVA.
Stadium North. Well, and that was the next thing I was going to say is like if you look at those 4 road games, it's a relatively favorable slate, right? Like Sam mentioned, NC State, not very good. Georgia Tech, that's tough. I will chalk that up as an L for Tech, no doubt. Florida State, they're probably still going to suck. I don't see that being
a lot of people are banking on them being good, just like right back being good. I don't
they
know
did
about
that last year too. And
With Thomas Castellanos, have you seen him play?
Yeah,
the last 3 years.
Florida
Hey, I'm
State's
not
going
optimistic
4-8 at best, and then UVA. So like that's 3 extremely winnable road games of the 4. And then at that point, I mean, basically my point here is that like I would say maybe 10 of our games this year are winnable, like plausibly winnable. It's just a matter of can you actually go out and execute that, or are you going to only win like 4 of them? So
yeah, it's an ACC schedule,
yes,
and in terms of the in conference, which means a lot of your games are going to be not coin flips, but winnable, as you just said.
Yeah.
What you also just said about the road trips, like think of the distance that we have to travel. It's not much. It's North Carolina, Atlanta,
twice.
Tallahassee, and UVA. Like last year, we had to go to Miami and then to Stanford. Like that alone was as many miles as we're going to travel this year, basically. So that's really nice. Starting off with the 2 SEC teams, not very nice. Not so psyched about those 2 matchups early on. Is the Pavia thing is that like definitely happening now? Like, does he definitely have eligibility?
Yeah.
I think he's going to play regardless if he has eligibility.
Okay. Yeah, because what are they going to really do, right?
Yeah. No, I mean that like that might sound like a joke. I mean that seriously. Like I think he is they have another player who has the same situation, a defensive player. Tech is going to play a bunch of 25-year-olds when they play Vanderbilt. That team is really old.
I mean, it's happening across the country. Like Sam Brumfield's going to go play another year at Memphis or Middle Tennessee. Memphis.
And if guys are enrolling, and it's going to be hard to stop that train if they don't stop it very, very soon in terms of the appeal or whatever that process is. But our first road game isn't until 9/27 against NC State. We talked a little bit about that. No G5 road game. Sam mentioned that.
Woo.
Vandy and ODU both at home. God, we got to win those games, man. Like I know it's Vandy like was much improved and but they're not going to sneak up on anybody this year, and especially not us because we were the ones that really got snuck up on in week 1. I'd be really nice to win those 2 games because if we don't beat both Vandy and ODU, I'm wondering if we go to a bowl. Then the bowl game starts to come into question in my mind. In conference play, the Cal one is interesting, right? We have Cal at home, their first trip to Blacksburg, and they give it the either or. It's either going to be on Thursday night or on Friday night. I'm assuming we all prefer Thursday night for the history.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, for sure.
All right. Well, I don't know when we're going to find out about that. I mean, people have to book hotel rooms and whatnot, but probably not too far away.
Just book them for both days. I don't know.
Luckily, Blacksburg has incredible infrastructure and plenty of hotel rooms.
Well, yeah, it shouldn't matter, right? First buy isn't until October 17th. Does that concern you at all? And it's kind of the half buy too, because that's only because of the Thursday night game.
Time to earn your paycheck, Jared Ferguson.
Yeah, that's why. That's another reason why I might chalk that Georgia Tech game up as a loss already. Those legs are going to be wobbling going into that game already.
And then our actual buy is November 8th, but we still have 4 games in November. And you mentioned it right off the top, Sam. Louisville at home, at Tallahassee, Miami at home, and then UVA. Now, I'm not like UVA is what it is. Those other 3 games, I expect to be a challenge. And that's tough, those 3 games in 4 weeks there.
Tech has played Florida State on the road each of the last 3 times they've played Florida State. It's just for some reason how the ACC scheduling works out. Every
Well, we
time they
keep changing
reshuffle it,
the format.
we
and stuff
never
because
get
of-
Florida State at home.
Yeah. It's very hasn't happened too much. So
Mm-mm.
that's pretty much the breakdown for the schedule. I don't know if you guys do. Let's not do win predictions. That's not what I want to do right
No,
now.
no, no.
I'm not
No.
spiritually ready for that.
I
Right
need
No.
more beers to do that.
It's still January, so but yeah, man, thank you both for being here, helping break down the DC. I mean, we spent a lot of time on that, but it was deserved. They spent a lot of time picking him, so we might as well break it down for about 45 minutes.
I mean, if you're doing 10 4-hour interviews or whatever, no wonder it took so long.
Scheduling nightmare for some admin somewhere.
That's a
That's a lot of
40-hour week.
talking.
That's someone's entire work week.
Well, Brent Pry's very good at talking, as we know. So
Yeah.
that's he does his wins in the offseason, and hopefully that was a big win. Make sure you're subscribed to the Sons of Saturday podcast feed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, and make sure to like this video. And if you made it to the end, let's use safe word Sam. Put Sam in the comments on
Hey.
YouTube if you made it to the end of the show. Robert, thank you for being here. Sam, as always, it was a lot of fun. And until next time, go Hokies.
Go Hokies.